My parents tried to give my inheritance to their golden daughter, but my grandparents had a surprising twist in store. The male 28-year-old hails from a family with a complicated and long history of favoritism. My younger sister Amy, 25, has always been chosen by my parents, particularly my father, over me. This predilection began in childhood and only worsened as we grew older. Amy was the golden child in my early memories. When I was 5 and she was 2 years old, our parents threw her an elaborate birthday party complete with professional face painters, a bouncy castle, and a petting zoo. That year, I celebrated my birthday with a store-bought cake and a little family lunch. This helped set the tone for years to come. As we grew older, the disparities became clearer. Amy always got the coolest toys, the best clothes, and the most attention. I remember saving months of allowance for a new bike when I was 10 years old. Amy wanted one as well, so when she saw it, she threw a fit. Rather than teaching her about waiting and saving, my parents went out and bought her an even nicer bike than mine. Another area where bias was visible was in education. Amy's parents attended all of her school festivities, whereas they usually missed mine. In 4th grade, I played the lead role in the school play. I practiced for weeks with considerable enthusiasm. My parents arrived an hour late on the night of the performance, so they missed my key scene. They consoled Amy after she complained of a stomach ache. She was fine later on. They had simply lost track of the time they spent playing with her. In terms of academics, nothing I did seemed to enough. I joined the math club, got straight A's in middle school, and even won first place in a regional science fair. Though my parents were unconcerned about Amy's accomplishments, they offered her a celebratory supper and a new phone as encouragement to keep improving when she received a B+ on one of her weakest subjects. Specifically, high school was difficult. With an eye on their approval, I immersed myself in any activity I could. Along with maintaining a 4.0 GPA, I was the editor of the school newspaper and the debate team captain. Amy breezed through school, barely maintaining a C average and spending much of her time hanging out with friends. I was chosen from our university as one of 2 junior-year applicants to participate in a well-known summer program at Harvard. It was an honor, and I felt wonderful. When I informed my father the news over supper, he grumbled and shifted the conversation to Amy's upcoming dance performance. At least my mother said, "That's nice." But she moved on quickly. My parents were unable to transport me to the airport on the night Amy's concert occurred on the same day I was leaving Harvard because they wanted to see Amy perform. I asked my friends' parents for a ride. Another painful experience was the college admission process. I spent months refining my writings, participating in extracurricular activities, and preparing for the SAT. Several prestigious institutions accepted me, and I was awarded a substantial scholarship to my preferred choice. When I told my parents about this at supper, their reaction was barely acceptable. "That's good, but don't let it run to your head. College isn't everything," my father warned me. "Just remember about us when you're off becoming a big shot," my mother remarked. My parents, on the other hand, were very understanding when Amy barely graduated from high school and decided not to attend college. They appreciated her for knowing herself and challenging conventional norms. They did something they never did for me. They paid for her car as a graduation gift. This repeated favoritism caused me significant emotional distress. Throughout my teens and early 20s, I battled anxiety and sadness. I began therapy in college and realized that my parents' behaviors were not my responsibility. Years of effort were required to improve my self-esteem and learn to validate myself without relying on my parents' approval. Despite the fact that my immediate family did not support me, I was able to live a respectable life. By the time I graduated from college with honors, I had a respectable job in finance and had even acquired my own home by the age of 27. Although my parents aren't, I'm proud of what I've accomplished. Here is where the present drama begins. On my father's side, my grandfather died not long ago. He left a big estate and was a successful entrepreneur who began from scratch. In his will, he divided his property evenly to his grandchildren, including myself, Amy, and our cousins, as well as his children, father, and siblings. My half of the inheritance was substantial, about $500,000. It would have allowed me to invest in my future, pay off my student loans, and possibly even start my own business someday. This unexpected windfall and the opportunities it could provide made me thrilled. When the will was read, my parents visibly became irritated. Later, they got me aside and told me that they thought it was unfair that I received an equal share. Amy, who lives in our parents' basement and works part-time at a coffee shop, said she needed the money more because she was struggling. Even though I was surprised, I tried to remain calm. I stressed that Grandpa made this decision. They had no say in how he did it. They insisted that I act morally and give Amy my due share. They were upset when I declined and started guilt-tripping me, calling me unappreciative and selfish. Every occasion that my father could recall in which they had assisted me was discussed. Though I worked part-time to help with funds, Dad prioritized paying for my medically necessary braces, purchasing the absolute minimum of school supplies, and allowing me to live at home while attending college. He conveniently forgot about the car they purchased Amy, the numerous shopping trips, and the fact that they still support her at the age of 25. The situation became increasingly more serious. My father, as executor of the will, decided to handle everything himself. Along with her own inheritance, he claimed that he would interpret Grandpa's intentions and give Amy my entire share. He said Grandpa would have hoped he knew about our unusual predicament. I was broken. This was not only clearly illegal, but it was also a painful reminder of how little my parents thought of me. I tried to argue with them, pointing out that Grandpa had always treated all of his grandchildren equally and was aware of our situation. My mother then accused me of speaking badly of the deceased by saying that Grandpa would have wanted anything other than what my father advocated. I recalled memories of Grandpa encouraging my academic and career objectives, but my parents dismissed them as misinterpretation. They stated that Grandpa wanted to make sure Amy was taken care of and had quietly expressed concerns about her future. When I inquired why he hadn't simply penned the will that way, they didn't respond. Amy, for her part, felt embarrassed in the situation but did not criticize our parents. When I tried to talk to her alone, she simply shrugged and said, "Mom and Dad know best." She was clearly not going to be much help. I sought advice from Grandpa's widow, my paternal grandmother, as I felt misled and wounded. She grew outraged when she found out what was going on. She informed me that my parents had no right to change the will, and that this was not what Grandpa had intended. Grandma sent some material that clarifies the situation. Several years ago, my parents allegedly urged Grandpa to leave everything to Amy in his will. Grandpa had fiercely resisted, stating that all of his grandchildren should be treated equally. He had even inserted a provision in his will stating that anyone who challenged the equitable distribution would lose their peace. Armed with this knowledge, I questioned my parents. Grandma's revelation of their previous attempt to influence the will astonished them. Saying they were simply concerned with Amy's future helped my father explain it, but I could see the guilt on their faces. Grandmother acted immediately away. She contacted the other executors and lawyers listed in her will. She also contacted my father's siblings, who were similarly outraged by what he was proposing. Together, they put an end to my father's scheme and ensured that the will was carried out as intended. Despite their displeasure with me, my parents had to back down. They stated that I should have addressed this internally rather than involving others and accused me of turning the family against me. My mother wailed over how I had divided the family and deceived them. When my father threatened to cut me completely out of their will, I told him I never expected anything from them. Now, if I accept the request, they threatened to cut off all communication. My father even suggested that if I inherited their house, I would not be welcome there. In a particularly low blow, my mother stated that my acceptance of the money shows that I never genuinely loved them and was only looking to profit from their death. The issue divides the extended family. A handful of my cousins are supportive since they are aware of the long-standing favoritism and appreciate my efforts to advocate for myself. Others feel I should have yielded in order to maintain peace, as family harmony takes precedence over financial concerns. Although my father's siblings are clearly on my side, this has affected their relationship as well as my parents. Amy is caught up in all of this. She revealed in me privately that, while she feels horrible and did not ask for it, she is not ready to confront our parents. She's been educated her entire life to rely on them and seek their approval, so I don't blame her completely. Still, a part of me wishes she could help me just once. This situation has brought back a lot of prior pain and hatred. I find myself recalling all the times I was passed over or disregarded in favor of Amy, the birthday parties I missed, the school functions my parents missed, the accomplishments that went unnoticed. This one incident seemed to be bringing to a close a lifetime of injustice. Despite the fact that the entire event has created a schism in the family, I am standing firm and want to claim my inheritance as Grandpa intended. My parents rarely talk to me, and family gatherings have become awkward. I missed our monthly family supper last week for the first time in as long as I could bear the icy shoulders and accusing glares. Despite the stress, a small part of me feels empowered. For the first time in my life, I am confronting my parents' harsh treatment. I'm declaring my worth and refusing to be written off. It's both dreadful and liberating at once. Though I believe I am in the right, the family turmoil is tiring me. I've been experiencing anxiety episodes again, which I hadn't had since college. To cope with all of this stress, I'm considering returning to therapy. Am I the one who should have refused to meet my parents' expectations and accepted my inheritance? Should I have simply given Amy the money to keep the peace? Although I am tired of being the family scapegoat, I am equally afraid of losing my family completely. Any advice or comment would be greatly appreciated. Update. A lot has transpired since my initial post, which was 6 months ago. I'd want to thank everyone for their encouragement and advice. It helped me stay strong throughout tough times. Let me start with the legal side of things. Many of you cautioned me, and I did consult my own attorney. He confirmed that I had every right to inherit, and that what my father attempted was illegal. He assisted me in recording everything and preparing to take legal action if necessary. Fortunately, things did not turn out as expected. My grandmother, together with my father's brothers, and her lawyers resolved issues outside of court. I received my entire money, and the will was carried out exactly as intended. My father was dismissed from his position as executor due to his attempts to manipulate the will. This was a pretty tough process that lasted several weeks. My parents threatened litigation, and there were stressful meetings and angry phone calls, but the law was clear, and they had to back down. The family rupture, which is still ongoing, is significant. My parents initially remained firm in their stance. They accused me of being avaricious and uncaring of my sister. They also attempted to rally other family members against me, spreading charges that I had pressured Grandpa into giving me money. Fortunately, most of the family saw through their deception. About a month after the will was accepted, there was one particularly terrible incident at a family gathering. My parents caused a disturbance when they arrived unannounced, despite the fact that my aunt was hosting and had not invited them. My father began to yell about how I had stolen from Amy and corrupted Grandma against her. My mother tossed an old photo album straight at my feet, claiming that I had wrecked all these great memories. It was unpleasant and terrible. It took several family members to calm things down and persuade my parents to go. My grandmother, bless her heart, proved to be my most significant supporter throughout this process. She told stories about how my grandfather had always been proud of my accomplishments and how he wanted to ensure that all of his grandchildren had equal opportunities. She even claimed Grandpa kept a scrapbook of my successes, including newspaper clippings of academic distinctions, copies of my college acceptance letters, and even the program from the university play that my parents had been late for. This understanding was both sad and amazing. Grandma also offered to help the rest of the family organize their records. She staged a family meeting that excluded my parents, recounting the full history of my parents' prejudice, even episodes I had long forgotten or had never heard of. Having someone finally realize the injustice I had endured for years was gratifying, but it also revived old wounds. About my sister Amy, she finally found her voice throughout all this. She approached me personally and apologized for not standing up for me before after some soul-searching and several lengthy conversations with our grandmother. She claimed she thought our parents' preference was inappropriate, but she was too afraid to challenge it. We talked about our childhoods and how they inspired each of us in tremendous depth and emotional intensity. Amy stated that being the favorite child was not as enjoyable as it seems. She never learned to stand on her own 2 feet and felt a lot of pressure to meet our parents' expectations. She told us of times when she wanted to do things on her own, but our parents would step in and handle everything for her, depriving her of the opportunity to grow and learn from her mistakes. This conversation marked a significant turning point in our relationship. We began to rebuild the sibling bond that our parents' prejudice had severed. Just the 2 of us have been meeting for coffee on a regular basis to discuss and encourage each other during this family issue. Everyone was taken aback when she announced that she planned to use her inheritance to pay for education. She claimed that watching me stand up for myself inspired her to start directing her own life. Once she had selected what she wanted to study, she enrolled in a nearby community college with the intention of transferring to a 4-year university. Our parents put out a shocked gasp. I suppose they were aware that their babying had not benefited Amy. My parents' reactions to all of this have been diverse and changing. They initially assaulted both of us angrily. They tried to guilt Amy into dropping out of college to support the family because they said I turned her against them. When their previous plan proved unproductive, they altered it. After numerous lengthy conversations with my grandma and witnessing Amy's remarkable transformation, my mother realized how detrimental their actions had been. She has made some tentative steps toward reconciliation, including starting therapy to address her issues. She contacted us to apologize, admitting that she had been unfair and requested the opportunity to make things right. It's a gradual process, and while I'm cautiously optimistic, I'm also setting firm restrictions. Unfortunately, my father has been less willing to own his mistakes. He is still outraged and feels like the victim in all of this. He has been cool toward Amy since she decided to go to college and hardly speaks to me. He has tried to control us several times, threatening to sell our childhood home if we don't come to our senses or forgiving us if we admit we were wrong. Although we are both standing firm, it hurts to see him alienate both of his children in this manner. The dynamics within the extended family have shifted considerably. I now reside closer to my father's siblings, who have been really helpful, and my grandma. Hearing from my aunts and uncles about how they dealt with my father's hard behavior throughout the years has helped to alleviate my loneliness in this fight. I've also formed stronger ties with several of my cousins who have supported me. Starting a monthly cousin meal helps us to catch up without the drama of the older generations. For myself, I have made good use of my fortune. After paying off my college loans, I now have a great sense of financial freedom. Working with a financial advisor, I developed a diverse investment portfolio. I've also saved some money in case I decide to start my own business in the future. I'm looking into opening a community center that offers competitively cost mental health treatments and financial literacy lectures. However, for me, purchasing therapy for myself and volunteering to do the same for Amy has been the most meaningful use of the funds. We're both learning to set fair boundaries with our parents and attempting to heal from our childhood experiences. Despite the long road ahead, I already feel like I'm growing in my understanding and ability to overcome emotional neglect and long-term prejudice. This entire procedure has brought some unexpected positive changes into my life. I now know a lot about setting boundaries and defending myself. Even though I know I did the right thing, it has not been easy, and there are still difficult days. I feel proud of myself for defying guilt and pressure. Among the more unexpected outcomes has been a shift in my career route. Dealing with all of this family discord and going through treatment has made me realize my own love for helping individuals who, dealing with all of this family turmoil and treatment has shown me how motivated I am to help others who have experienced similar family dynamics. I am currently considering returning to school to specialize in adult offspring of emotionally immature parents and working as a family therapist. I have also been assisting children from difficult family situations at a neighboring youth facility. It is extremely rewarding to be able to provide the encouragement and support that I wished I had received as a child. I'm even thinking of establishing a scholarship fund for youngsters in similar circumstances with some of my inheritance. My contact with Amy has gotten better. We celebrate Siblings Day once a month by doing something fun just the two of us. Our hiking and picnic last month were the most relaxed and connected we'd felt since we were kids. Without our parents' influence, we are gradually rebuilding our relationship on our own terms. Things with my parents continue to be hard. My mother has tried to rebuild our relationship. She has been attending therapy on a regular basis, and she has begun to realize some of the consequences of her bias. We've had a couple one-on-one lunches when we've had some honest, albeit challenging discussions about our history and future plans. Though it is not perfect, there is clearly room for improvement. Nonetheless, my father continues to be resistant to change. He still claims he has done nothing illegal and that Amy and I should be grateful. He refused to be in the same room as me, so he skipped several family occasions. Though it hurts, I'm attempting to let go of my desire to force him to see things differently or control his reactions. Grandma has become a pillar of strength for Amy and me. She has been telling us more stories about our grandfather and how proud he was of us for standing up for ourselves. She has always advocated for justice and understanding, making her an excellent mediator in family disputes. The entire experience has taught me a lot about what it truly means to be family. I've come to realize that sometimes the family you choose is more encouraging than the one you were reared in. Along with forming a close circle of friends who have been extremely supportive throughout this road, I have gotten closer to my aunts, uncles, and cousins who have stood by me. Setting limits and exercising self-care have become increasingly important to me. I'm getting better at saying no to situations that jeopardize my mental health, and I no longer feel awful about putting my personal well-being first. I was so focused with gaining my parents' approval that I had always avoided exploring new interests and activities. To those in the same situation, I would advise you not to let anyone make you feel terrible about collecting what is rightfully yours. Even if it causes disagreement, it is reasonable to defend oneself. Though family dynamics may be complicated, you are entitled to fair treatment. Remember, it is never too late to begin living the life you deserve. Consult a therapist if required. Surround yourself with positive individuals. And don't be afraid to set boundaries. Your value is determined by who you are personally, not how your family treats you. I'd like to thank each of you again for your suggestions and encouragement. It meant more than you could have imagined during a particularly difficult time. Despite the difficulties, I am optimistic about the future and feel a sense of self-assurance that I have not felt in years. I am excited about where this new chapter of my life will take me, and I am determined to break the cycle of favoritism and develop stronger relationships with my own future family members. I got uninvited from my mom's birthday because I didn't look good next to my sister's boyfriend. Turns out, I was actually his boss. He looked me in the eye and said, "If you still insist on coming home, then don't call me your father." 3 weeks later, the power, water, and internet in their house all shut off, on my mom's birthday. Follow my narrative, perhaps you will recognize yourself in it. Hello, this is Ryan. I'm 30 years old and reside in a little town around 40 minutes from Seattle. Every morning, I make myself a cup of coffee, put on the weather, and drive less than 10 minutes to work. I co-founded a small technology company focused on sustainable energy. Not everyone understands what I do, including my family. They still think I spend my days tightening screws and repairing machinery, which I don't mind. I have never felt the need to explain. When someone asks about my family, my parents or my sister Jessica, I smile slightly. "It's been a while since we talked," I remarked, and that's it. I'm not hiding anything, but I don't see the sense in retelling it anymore. I haven't contacted them in over 2 years. No calls, texts, holidays, or birthdays, nothing. Just a long calm stretch, as if the connection between us had been severed and no one tried to repair it. I used to feel that family was everything. But 2 years ago, on my mother's birthday, everything changed. 2 years ago, 3 weeks before my mother's birthday, I had just booked a trip and taken time off work. The plan was simple: go home early, stay for a few days, and help with preparations, just like every other year. Nothing extraordinary. I just wanted to let them know. I contacted my mother right away, but my father answered after only 2 rings. "I'll be home 2 days early," I announced nonchalantly. "If there's anything you need me to pick up or help with, just let me know." He initially responded vaguely, but then hesitated. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded strange, heavier than normal, as if he was attempting to avoid something. "Ryan, if possible, maybe don't come home this year." At the time, I assumed he was just concerned about my schedule. "It's fine, Dad," I said, still clutching a steaming mug of coffee. "I've got everything sorted, it's no trouble." The pause was longer this time. Then he spoke again, firmer, but colder. "Jessica's bringing her boyfriend home this year. He's a manager, someone important. Speaks well and carries himself properly. And your job, well, it isn't very comfortable to talk about, so it's best if you don't come." At that point, I felt heat rising from the back of my neck to my face. My heartbeat quickened, and I automatically grasped my coffee mug closer. "What the hell did you just say?" I exclaimed, unable to keep my voice calm. "Are you seriously saying that to me right now?" He didn't dispute it, take it back, or soften. Instead, he responded plainly and sharply. "You coming home would just embarrass the whole family. If you insist on coming, don't call me your father." And then he disconnected up without a moment's pause. I put the phone down. My palm was still shaking and somewhat sticky from sweat. The apartment was completely silent, no TV, no footsteps, just me standing there, staring into space like I'd been plucked out of my life. His words kept echoing in my head, slow and clear, like a recording stuck on repeat. "You coming home would just embarrass the whole family. If you still insist on coming back, don't call me your father." For a moment, I wondered if I had misheard him, but no. Every word and tone was cold as ice and solid as stone. There was no slip of the tongue and no room for hope. I clenched my jaw, my throat tightening as if something had lodged there and refused to move. Right immediately, memories began to flood back. I silently paid all of their bills, including electricity, water, and internet, for more than 2 years. Nobody ever mentioned anything, and now they're calling me the family's shame. I quickly took up my phone, my hands still slightly trembling, despite the fact that my mind had begun to cool. I opened the banking app and went down to see my transaction history. My only purpose was to see how much I had spent on my family over the previous 2 years. I needed a number for my power bill, water bill, and internet service, every month, without fail. Each payment was handled on schedule and automatically deducted from my account. For 2 years in a row, nearly $400 per month has been paid without fail. I gently scrolled to the very bottom. Total amount spent, $9,842.17. I stared at that number for a few more seconds, not because I was astonished, but because something inside my chest had suddenly settled. Not grief, not even fury, but just empty space. Nearly $10,000, and now they label me the family's shame. As I glanced at the enormous list of bank transactions, a silent question arose, one that no one in my family had posed in 30 years. Has Jessica ever done as much for our parents as I have? It was not jealousy, and I was not looking for credit. It was merely that if I am deemed the family's shame, who is that standard being evaluated against? I had paid approximately $10,000 in living expenses for them secretly, without asking for anything in return, and without ever mentioning it. What about her? Has she ever had to make a sacrifice or beg for help? Or did she arrive, smile pretty, and make an impact in a lovely dress while holding a successful boyfriend? I was not asking to keep score. I was asking because, for the first time, I noticed that fairness was never considered in this household. I'd grown accustomed to standing on the sidelines since I was a child. In family photos, I was frequently partially hidden behind someone else or captured at the edge of the frame. I wasn't exactly gazing at the camera. Nobody ever told me to step aside, but I always did. Jessica was at the center of every important event in our family, from birthdays and graduations to her breakups. There was always a reason for everyone to band together, console, and celebrate her. I can't recall the last time somebody inquired if I was okay. Jessica is 2 years older than me, but the difference between us was never about age. She was the hope, the future-oriented child that our parents proudly mentioned when relatives visited. And me? In the same talks, if I was mentioned at all, it was as a short footnote. Ryan. Oh, he's fine. I believe he works in technology. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, remained out of trouble, and quietly handled everything, they'd eventually see me. However, they didn't. It turns out that when you're used to being invisible, nobody notices when you leave. I began covering my parents' utility costs, electricity, water, and internet, nearly 2 years ago. My mother called first, and everything started there. That day, she moaned about how the cost of living had risen, how this month's bills had unexpectedly increased, and how their retirement income was no longer sufficient. Then, gently and hesitantly, she said, "If you could help us even a little, it would mean a lot." I agreed. At the time, I assumed it would be only a few months until things settled down. However, the months that followed looked precisely like the previous one. Nobody mentioned terminating it, and there was no backup plan. Every now and then, I'd ask, "Is Jessica helping out at all, Mom?" She'd always evade the topic. Sometimes she'd say, "Just help us this month, your sister will pitch in next time." Other times, "Your sister's covering Dad's medical stuff, that's not easy either." I heard those lines so many times I could recite them by heart, and I just smiled and let it go every time, because I knew none of it was true. So I kept sending the money, nearly $400 per month, reliably and quietly, without complaint. Nobody mentioned it. It wasn't that I didn't care, it was simply that I felt it was the correct thing to do. I used to think that if I was quiet and responsible enough, they would notice. But today, after everything, they look at me and say, I'm the family's shame. After a time, everything around me was silent, and I just sat there, paralyzed on the couch. I still had my phone in my hand. I wasn't angry or heartbroken anymore. There was only one clear emotion sitting in my chest, something like, that's enough. Following that, I opened my banking app. I scrolled down to the automatic payments section, where I had set up monthly transfers to cover my parents' expenses for power, water, and internet. I tapped into each thing one by one and canceled them without hesitation. I did it softly, not to avenge myself, but to preserve the one thing I still had. A semblance of self-esteem, the only thing they hadn't taken away from me. About a week later, I received the first message from my mother, in the same soothing tone she always used. There was no mention of what had happened, nor was there an apology. I just got a notice that the internet bill is due. Can you take care of it? I read the message, glanced at the screen for a time, and then placed the phone down without responding. Not because I was attempting to make a statement, but because, after all, the first thing they thought to say was a request. Pay the internet bill. There was no, are you okay? Or even a basic, can we talk? So I remained silent, and that silence, to me, said everything. 2 weeks later, my father called. The phone rang a few times before stopping. I didn't respond. A few minutes later, he left a voicemail. His tone was sharp and impatient, as it usually had been. The power company called. This month's bill hasn't been paid. What's going on? There was no worry, no mention of what he said the day I called to say I'd be home for Mom's birthday. I listened to the message, then turned off the screen and placed the phone face down on the table. And just like that, I remained silent until my mother's birthday. My mother's birthday was around 3 weeks after my father advised me not to come home. The party went on as normal, with her favorite roasted chicken, cake from her favorite bakery, and a few close relatives gathering around the dinner table. Except for me, everything had been meticulously planned and executed. That afternoon, at precisely 4 p.m., I was sitting in my living room with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold when my phone chimed. It was my mother calling. I gazed at her name on the screen for a few seconds before putting the phone down. I didn't respond, didn't even think twice. My dad called a few minutes later, followed by Jessica. 3 calls in less than 10 minutes, I let them all go. There is no curiosity, no one to reply. I stayed where I was, leaning lightly against the back of the chair, my gaze fixed on the fogged-up glass. The sky outside was a drab gray, no rain, but cold in that silent, creeping manner that suggests winter has just brushed up against your threshold. The communications began to arrive approximately 10 minutes later. Mom was first. Ryan, the power has been turned off. The entire house is dark. Please pay the bill. I picked up the phone and read her message in silence. There was no anger or surprise, just a calm hollowness creeping through my chest, the type you get when you've spent years caring for a family and you're the only one left to bear the burden. Then my father said, "No water, we can't cook. Handle it now." Following that, Jessica replied, "Internet's down. Guests are arriving. Please fix this, urgently." I looked at the clock, 5:12 p.m. I remembered clearly. I canceled all automatic payments exactly 3 weeks ago, immediately after my father informed me that if I insisted on coming home, I should never call him Dad again. And now, in the midst of the birthday party they had instructed me not to attend, everything began to shut down: power, water, and the internet. Each one vanished just when they needed it most. I didn't text back or call. I didn't feel the need to explain. I merely sat there, carefully rotating the cold coffee cup in my hands, my eyes still fixed on the window, as if seeing past all I could see. And in that moment, I realized they weren't phoning because they missed me. They were calling because there was no one left to shoulder their weight. Around 6 p.m., my phone began buzzing again, this time nonstop. Yet it wasn't my parents or Jessica anymore. It was the relatives, who only visit on holidays yet feel entitled to pass judgment. The communications arrived in waves. Some people labeled me disrespectful. One remarked openly, "You embarrassed your mother in front of the whole family." Another, more subtle but just as devastating, said, "Your sister was right, people like you shouldn't show up on a happy day." I read through each message without responding, not because quiet implied agreement, but because I'd grown tired of explaining myself to people who always chose the louder throng above what was right. I was about to put down the phone when the screen lit up again. Aunt Lauren was the only family member who still trusted me. She was calling on video via an ancient app that only she and I still used because we were the only ones who cared enough to look each other in the eyes when it counted. I paused for a bit before answering on the second ring. The first thing I saw was her face, somewhat obscured by the yellow illumination from the kitchen behind her, a location I knew like the back of my hand. Every crack in the wall and every noisy cabinet. But tonight the room felt different. There were clinks of silverware, uneasy laughs, and random small conversation in the background. She glanced at me through the screen, her eyes warm and troubled. "You're not going to pay for it, Ryan." Her tone was light, as if she were trying to figure out what was going on. I peered into her eyes, and when I finally spoke, my tone was sluggish, as if I was dragging up something I had buried for too long. "You know, Auntie, it was Dad. Told me not to come." I gulped hard. He said if I still insisted on showing up, I shouldn't call him my father anymore. She became quiet. Her eyes changed, as if she was studying the room behind her. Right then, the call devolved into mayhem. I could hear my mother's voice through the noise. "Tell him I'm ashamed of him. On this day, of all days, how could he do this?" My father said sharply and loudly, "It's not that serious, it's just paying a few bills. What kind of man gets petty over money?" Another voice, I believe it was my uncle. "Poor Jessica, having to deal with a brother like that." Footsteps approached the camera. Jessica appeared behind Aunt Lauren, arms folded and lips twisted with annoyance. "He even picked up the call? Mom's been crying all day, does he even care? Seriously, no shame at all." I didn't say anything. I just observed and remained silent, as if it were the only way to defend myself. I departed. Just as I was ready to end the call, another face came on the left side of the screen. A young man with perfectly combed hair and a dark suit. He stared at me with confusion in his eyes, then smiled hesitantly. "Hey boss," he replied, his voice somewhat scratchy, as if he wasn't sure if the words belonged in this situation. I froze. My gaze remained fixed on the screen, and I unconsciously grabbed the phone closer. I had not expected this. Not here, not on the night when everyone felt I was too much of a shame to be invited. I stared at him for a few seconds longer, and then it all clicked. His expression, the way he spoke. Of course, he was one of the new personnel who had lately transferred from our southern branch. We'd exchanged a few emails and he'd sent me 2 reports, but I had no idea he was Jessica's boyfriend, the one everyone was trying to impress. The room behind Aunt Lauren appeared to hold its breath. I noticed her look over her shoulder, and the kitchen erupted in a frantic commotion. Then someone said quietly, "Wait, what did he just call Ryan?" Another voice followed, confused. "Boss? Does that mean Ryan is Jessica's boyfriend's boss?" The whispers grew like a rising wave, overlapping and uneasy. And me? I just kept looking at the screen. No nod, no denial. I am simply waiting to see where it goes. And right then, the young man stood up straighter, looked past the camera to the others in the room, and spoke plainly. "In case you didn't know, I work at Pacific TerraTech. Mr. Ryan is one of the company's co-founders." His remarks were crisp and obvious, loud enough to cut through the clatter of dishes and murmuring, and the room fell into an unusual quiet. It's not awkward, simply stunned. I still did not say anything. I pushed my lips together and gave a soft nod of confirmation. He returned his gaze to the computer, eyes wide, and I said calmly, evenly, as if the words had been waiting for him, "Hope your big introduction goes perfectly." Then I disconnected up. That night, I slept soundly, no tossing and turning, no jolting up in the dark with old questions replaying through my mind. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not from satisfaction, but because they finally recognized who I was. The next day, before the sunlight had fully filtered through the thin curtains, I went for my phone and checked my emails as usual. A few meeting reminders, a couple of accounting comments, and then I noticed a name I didn't recognize in the from field. Hudson Kane. I opened the email. The first line struck me immediately. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were Jessica's brother. I've always respected you at the company." I arched an eyebrow, leaned into the pillow, and continued reading. Hudson wrote that he had been truly astonished to discover of the family link between me and Jessica, and then without sidestepping or softening it, he stated, "I didn't expect her to be like that. I'll be ending this relationship. Thank you for not putting me on the spot before everyone." I laid the phone on my chest and closed my eyes briefly. It took me a few minutes to reopen the inbox and begin typing my response, slowly, clearly, and without embellishment. "Hudson, that's your matter. I don't expect anyone to make decisions to stay in my good graces. Think carefully before you do anything. And for the record, I don't bring family into the workplace." I pressed send. No more thought, no lingering emotion. For me, that was sufficient. Some things, once clarified, I don't require anything else. Around 10 a.m., while I was winding up a meeting with the department heads and taking notes, my phone rang in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw the name Jessica, my sister. I stared at it for a few seconds before hitting decline, not out of rage, not to make a point, but simply because I'd had enough of apologies that only appeared after everything had already come apart. Within 5 minutes, a message arrived. "I'm sorry. I didn't think Hudson would change like that. You're his boss. If you said something, I'm sure he'd listen. Please talk to him. Ask him to come back to me." After reading it, I approached the hallway window and leaned against it. I reviewed the message several times before typing my response, which was neither too long nor too short for her to understand. "Hudson didn't leave because I told him to. He left because of how you live, how you treat people, how you look down on what you don't understand, and how you always assume that with a soft enough voice you can steer anyone." I pressed send, put the phone back in my pocket, and returned to my desk. However, less than a minute later, another message arrived. "I know I messed up. This time, I mean it. I'll change. Please believe me, just this once." I did not respond. I read it, sat with it for a bit, and nothing moved inside me, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood. Sometimes the distance between two people isn't in the apology. It's in when the apology arrives. I gently deleted the message, leaving nothing behind, and returned to my current life. A week later, on a Friday afternoon, as I walked back into the home from the garage, I froze on the porch. My parents stood at the front door, each holding a little suitcase, their faces drawn with exhaustion from the long travel. I didn't ask why they were here. If they'd traveled all the way out to see me, it wasn't a casual visit. I opened the door and welcomed them in. No tension, no forced politeness, just a simple choice. I didn't want to have that conversation outside, where the wind was picking up on the porch. We sat in the living room, and the tea on the table was still steaming. My father talked first. He apologized in a quieter tone than normal. My mother added to it, saying they'd thought things through, perhaps they'd gone too far, and things should never have come to this point. I remained silent and did not interfere, just listening to see if this apology marked the end of something or the beginning of something else. And, as I expected, my father's tone changed. "We're family, Ryan, and family helps each other. We raised you, sent you to school, everything you have now, a part of it comes from us, right?" I looked at him. My countenance remained unchanged, but my stance straightened somewhat. Then my mother spoke, her voice quiet, as if she were saying something quite sensible. "If you could maybe send us about $2,000 a month, just a little support. It's not much for someone like you." I stared at the two people sitting in my living room, the same people who had once kicked me out of a family event because they thought I was an embarrassment. And now they were sitting in my house, placing a monetary value on their apology. $2,000 each month, because I was their son. And to them, my success was a debt that I owed them. Following their request, I let out a quiet chuckle, not loud or snarky, but the type you get when someone tells you a story that doesn't make sense. I looked at my parents. Their eyes were fixated on mine, as if they expected me to nod in accord. But I wasn't angry. I'd come too far to be bothered by stuff like this. I leaned back in the chair, my voice calm and clear. "What about Jessica? How much will she be contributing each month?" The room appeared to pause at that point. The air tightened. My father cast a peek at my mother. She responded slowly, her voice falling slightly. "Your sister's job, it's still unstable. And the breakup with Hudson has taken a toll on her." I nodded softly, not surprised. The same old excuses dressed in empathic language, but they were merely deflections. I raised my gaze, looked squarely at them, and said, "If she agrees to support you with $2,000 per month, I'll do the same, no more, no less." They didn't say anything, just gazed at me, trying to figure out if I was serious. I went on quietly. "Or, if you want me to carry the full amount, I'll need something in writing. A legal agreement confirming that after you both pass, the house will belong to me in full." I sat still after that, no pressure, no further explanation, just waited to see how they'd react now that, for the first time, I was establishing the terms for something they'd always felt was my responsibility. As soon as I finished speaking, the audience fell into a deep, dense quiet. My father suddenly rose to his feet. He smashed his palm down on the hardwood table, tipping the teacup over and pouring its contents down the side. His shout echoed around the room, his chest rising and falling in fury. "You're setting conditions for your parents? We raised you for over 20 years, and now you want to nickel and dime us like this? What kind of life are you living, huh?" He was shouting so loudly that I wasn't surprised if the folks next door heard everything. I didn't move or flinch. I just sat there, hands resting on the chair's armrests, gaze fixed on him, not cold, but no longer gentle. I waited for him to finish before standing up carefully. My voice came out low and calm, yet clear enough to pierce through the chaos he'd just created. "I think you both should leave my house." It was not a threat. It was not spoken in anger. It was merely a plea from someone who had reached the limits of what respect could provide. No one said anything else, only the sound of baggage dragging across the hardwood floor and the door clicking shut behind them, quieter than all they had just left inside me. It's been 2 years since I last saw them, right here in my own home. I did not ban their phone numbers, change my email address, or cut them off totally. I stopped reaching out and waited. I waited to see if they would still consider me a member of the family after I was no longer under the shadow of duty and obligation. In the past 2 years, there has been no call or message inquiring how I've been, no mention of birthdays, health, or even a basic "how are you doing?" I used to believe that one day, they will change. However, I've realized that not everyone changes, especially those who have never recognized they were wrong in the first place. I still live here, work, and go about my daily existence. The only difference is that I no longer allow myself to be an emotional ATM, eager to give and be damaged in the name of obligation. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that family is not a place where people can demand kindness and call it love. A real family is one in which you are valued as a person regardless of what you have to offer. Not as a wallet, not as a backup plan. Not as a last resort when everything else fails. And before I end this chapter, I'd like to ask you a question. Was I wrong to decide not to return? For refusing to assist my parents with $2,000 per month, despite the fact that they are now elderly and reared me. I used to believe that my family could fix anything. But after being treated like a stranger in my own home more times than I can count, I chose to stand up and break the cycle. Was I overly cold? Perhaps I was finally learning to appreciate myself at the perfect time. Please leave your opinions below. I sincerely want to hear from you, whether you agree or disagree. If the tale resonated with you, please subscribe to help support the channel. There are still many stories waiting to be told and heard. Take care, and see you in the next one. Thank you for staying till the end.